do you unite the different constituencies that the Democratic Party appeals to? The trade unions, the middle and upper middle class, the underclass. How do you unite them when those class differences are also sliced by gender differences, by race differences, and by differences on the issue of war and peace? Where is the unity? What integrates the Democratic Party? First, let me deal with some nonsense. Is the Democratic Party the party of special interests like the labor movement? That is very dangerous nonsense. At a time when the American trade unions were being pushed back, when workers were being laid off, when workers were giving up gains they had made, the Reagan administration wrote a tax bill that gave the Treasury away to the rich. And when anybody talks about special interests and says blacks are a special interest, Hispanics are, poor are, Asians are, women are, we have to say that is absolute nonsense. The special interests are the corporate rich whose priorities are permeating our society. Wait till I come back and give my radical speech. But there's a second sense in which the special interest charge does stick, in one sense. And I want to go back to the 30s. Why was it that the trade union movement in the 1930s was not seen as a special interest? Because it was perceived as doing something that was in the interest of the whole country as well as itself. Because it represented a vision, not simply for the members, but for the society, right? Why was it that Martin Luther King, leading a movement whose black members, 12% of the population, in the 1960s, was able to energize the society, to transform not simply black America, but white America as well? His movement gave white America back its soul. Why? Because it was not simply a movement of black people for their special interest. It was a movement of black people for the dream of the United States of America, which was the interest of all of us. And I think what we have to do, in this Democratic Party, in this America of ours, is to link those interests to some kind of a vision. Now, let me get very specific. The two most dynamic political movements, social movements in 1984 politically, have been minorities and women. That's obvious. The demands of minorities and women for full employment, for comparable worth, for blacks receiving as much as whites and browns and Asians and all the rest, for women receiving as much as men, those special interest demands, I think, are potentially like the demands of the trade union movement in the 1930s. They are demands which link up with the common interest of the overwhelming majority of the American people. To defeat racism and sexism in this society, you have to adopt policies which are going to reach out and enormously help trade unionists, including white male trade unionists. And also, we have to say, it seems to me, in making this point, to the yuppies, and do not write them off. Because if there are people in this society who think, well, one can look down at the trade union movement, I've got mine, Jack, the yuppies have to understand they are standing in line. The crisis is going to hit everybody. It hits the poor and the minorities first, it hits the working people second, it is going to hit everybody. And I think what we have to say is, in this society, if we respond to the demands of the black and other minority movements and the women's movement, we have to create a society which is better for almost everybody.